Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion of Library of the Unwritten by AJ Hackwith. I feel like if you guys watch my channel, you know Hannah, because I talk about her often. But this is Hannah, she's my co-host.
Hi.
And yeah, we're going to talk about the book. So we're going to start with a spoiler-free chat.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I was talking to someone about this before because I read Middle Game and then immediately started this. And I feel like all the whimsy that I was expecting from Shauna Maguire, I didn't get in Middle Game. So I don't know if my love for this is genuinely because it was good. It would be really interesting to see what you think, because other people have been like, yeah, it was okay, but I really enjoyed it. And I think that's because the whimsy that I was missing in Middle Game, I found in this. So it ended up being what I was looking for. Like I was in the mood for it when I read it. So therefore I really, really enjoyed it. And I've realised I've still got the little note from where Blanche bought it for me. So thank you, Blanche. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was great.
I gave it 4 stars as well. I really enjoyed it. I liked that it was. I don't know. I feel like I always expect books that are funny to not be good. But I thought that it was just like genuinely such a funny book, but also so good and had so much depth in other areas. And that on top of it being really fun and just being like this wonderful like adventure fantasy story, I also really liked the writing. I thought there were passages of just like really, really lovely description. I loved all the characters. Just a good time all around.
Yeah, the characters were great. I agree with you. And it's really interesting because I was talking to Ali about it, and I think Ali was struggling to get into it because I think where it has at the beginning of each chapter those passages from like past diaries, it can feel a bit convoluted to begin with. But the actual like writing of the story and the adventure story is really straightforward. Like you're never lost in where you're going, and even so there's still space and capacity for plot twists, which I really appreciated. That I was like, oh, like it's not that necessarily I saw it coming, it's that it was well set up so that when it gets to that point I'm like, oh, of course, you know, like I really appreciate that.
I feel like I know which one you're talking about, and in the spoiler section.
Yeah, we'll wait till
so ready to talk about that. Yeah, and I also felt that the characters were developed really well, even though like the book took place over 2 days, 2 or 3 days. There isn't that much room for character growth because like although they go through a lot, they're not going to be like a completely different person at the end of 2 days.
Yeah.
But I still felt like there was no, like I still got to know them all in enough depth.
Yeah.
That, yeah, I felt like the characters were explored really well over the course of the story.
I think it's true because like I was talking to Molly about this morning, and we were talking about how I'd seen this like video essay on when you're writing a story, your characters either need to develop because they're put into taken out of their comfort zone basically, or they need to have something that they believe as like a truth challenged and like find out that it's a lie or whatever. And I think what's really interesting about this is you're right, it's only over 2 days, so the truth that's being challenged for each individual character can only be explored so far because of that. Having said that, because they're all thrown out of their comfort zone, it means that they are learning stuff about themselves as well. Like the choices they're making, it's all very reactive. And I think that for me, having reactive characters as opposed to passive characters always makes for a more engaging story for me. I am very character driven in my reading. Like I love characters, and sometimes I am in the mood for like a slower paced novel or whatever, but it's books like this that are just fun to read. You don't need to overthink it. Like they're just going through stuff and they're kind of like just reacting to it as they go. Do you know what I mean? And I just found that, I just thought it was really fun. And I think like, even though when like they move from setting to setting to setting, sometimes that really irks me. But the way that it's done in this book, they're challenges, and it's like, okay, we need to get to here, but rather than them just going to that thing, they've got to work out how they're going to get through the door. And even that is like a little bit of personal discovery as to how they're going to, what are they going to sacrifice, what are they going to take with them. Even those like little journeys from set to set to set works really well, in my opinion. So yeah, I thought it was great.
I also, what you said about liking character driven books, because I'm like that as well, but I feel like it's always a question of if a book is character driven or plot driven, and this I just felt had such a good balance. Like there was always something happening, but there could have been nothing happening, and I felt like I would have been just as engaged because I still went on such a journey with the characters.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think you'll read the next 2 books?
I'm very excited. But I did.
I'm like, yeah.
I was speaking to a friend of mine who also recently read it, and she was like, she didn't know that it was a series. So she said, it feels like it could be a series, but also I like that it has some closure at the end. And then I had to break the news to her that it was a series. And she was like, oh, I'm going to go read book 2 now.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's just, but it has closure. And yeah. I don't know that book 2 is going to have closure. So I feel like I'm going to wait until book 3 is out.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking exactly the same. Yeah, I was like, because I'm really bad with series anyway. If I try to read a whole series in one go, I just lose momentum with it. I like to dip in and out of a series. So I wanted to pick it up immediately afterwards because I wanted to know what happened. But like you said, I don't know if I'm going to get the same level of closure with book 2, because why would you? If you know book 3 is going to be around the corner, why wouldn't you just go for it? So I'm with you on that. I'm going to wait until book 3's out, then read book 2, and then see how I feel, and then maybe give myself 6 months, and then come to book 3 and do it at that rate. But that's not to say that it's because it's bad or anything like that. That's just more when it comes to my reading. I'm turning more and more into a mood reader, and that is a real issue, because I love writing a TBR and like having like a full-on list, and then I'm like, what a great list of books to read. I'm not going to pick up any of them though. I'm just going to go read this because that's what I'm in the mood for. So yeah, not ideal, but yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great, and I'm really excited for the next 2, to be honest. I think it will work as a trilogy. I think any more than that and it might be a bit heavy, because I don't know how many times can they learn those lessons, but we'll see. I'm intrigued by it though. I'm excited to read the next 2.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much more in the spoiler-free vein that I want to say. Do you?
Do you want to just skip straight to the spoiler stuff, because I have thoughts?
Yes. Okay. Can we discuss the hero-shaped elephant in the room?
The hero-shaped elephant is an excellent way of putting it. That was the thing that I was just like, that's so clever. Like, that's because it was like, it was the build-up of like, oh, he must be a hero. He's really good looking. He's really charming. He's like done all this stuff. But everything he does is really manipulative. Like, even from the start, when he's just like, oh yeah, I gave her the first 2 pages. And she's like, why the fuck would you do that? Like, why would you do that? And I just like, even like those little things where she's like, she puts it down to him being arrogant and stupid. And then at the end, you're like, oh, no, like everything he did because he wanted to control the situation. He's a manipulative asshole. And I loved him so much more finding out that he was a villain the whole time than like seeing him as a hero, especially because like when they have that whole conversation of, now that she knows he's a villain, she knows what he'll do, and she knows that she can like guarantee his behavior in a certain situation. So she trusts him more now that she knows he's a villain as well, which I really like. I just liked the whole thing being turned on its head. But this whole book is a collection of stereotypes and tropes, and like AJ Hackwith just going, but if we did this to it, like it's not even like a full 180. It's just enough of a tilt to be like, but did you see that coming? Because I bet you didn't. Like, it's just so clever. I thought it was great.
And the minute that it was revealed, I was just like, of course he's a villain. He's handsome and charming and like wonderful, and he's every like villain or morally grey character in a book or TV show ever. Like these all of the things that made us assume that he was a hero, all of the reasons that we love villains.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you've hit the nail there as well, that he is morally grey. It's really interesting because I've got a real fascination with morally grey characters anyway. And I think when you've literally got heaven versus hell chasing a MacGuffin, having a morally grey character slap bang in the middle of it truly reveals how morally grey all of the characters are, considering you've literally got the forces of good versus the forces of evil, and they're not. They're a bunch of librarians, but everyone thinks that they're evil. The whole group, every single character could be boiled down to like a morally grey character, because even like the angels aren't good people. Do you know what I mean? And the demon that isn't really a demon, he just thinks he should be because he bullied some guy into killing himself. And like the muse that, you know, took inspiration and tried to write her own stuff, so got in trouble. Like, they've all broken the rules, like everyone has, so they're all like slap bang in the middle of this like moral, like grey morality kind of thing. Was again really, really clever, because it looks like it's the thing that, just to change subject slightly, it's the thing I wish they had done with Star Wars. To be like an absolute fucking nerd about it, I wish they had done that with Star Wars, because Star Wars is always about like light versus dark and good versus evil, and how these two sides are always at each other, and there's never anyone that's like just the grey in the middle of, I don't always make the right choice, but I make the choice that I think is right in the moment, which is what every single character is doing, whether they've got their own agenda or not. There's truly only one bad character, and that's Andrus. And that's because he's bad from the start. And everyone else is just kind of, they're just trying to do what they think is right, even if what they're doing is wrong. And I love a bit of grey morality. It was just great. So like the fact that he's the most obvious, but even like Claire, you know, killing people to protect the people she loves, and not just like killing them so they go to heaven or hell, literally destroying them, unmaking them. Yeah, that's villain stuff. That's not like, you know, and to know that she did that 30 years ago, 300 years ago to her boss, and everyone was like, oh, we just assumed you'd killed him, but you did actually kill him. Cool. Like, yeah, dark.
Even Andrus, I didn't trust him, but I kind of wanted to the whole way through the book. I was like, I know there's something off, but like, so I knew he was going to do something bad, but I wasn't expecting him to do what he did. I wasn't expecting like that level of betrayal.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was interesting, but it was very much that was probably the only thing that dropped it from a 5 stars to a 4 stars, is I didn't want that to be the betrayal. I just think there could have been something more that could have been done. It just seemed like a really, like, he's got power. He's an, like, doing the archiving, he has power. He doesn't have necessarily the power of the Unwritten Library, which he wants, and it does raise the stakes for the books in general. But I just thought that as a plot point was probably the weakest part of what was a fantastic book. But what I think is really interesting is you've got demons, you've got dark academia stuff, in that you've got the Unwritten Library, and you've got the concept of like villains and grey morality. Those are all Gothic tropes. But this book does not read like a Gothic book. Like, at the moment, I like, because considering, especially that it was my pick, and I was like, oh yeah, this sounds really Gothic, ooh. And then reading it, I'm like, no, this is just an adventure story. Like, it's a MacGuffin chase, and I love that. And it has all these Gothic tropes, but it's not really Gothic at all.
Tom Holt wrote a book called The Management Style of Supreme Beings, and basically God sells the universe to like this group of aliens, and you're also dealing with these like intense concepts of morality and the nature of good and evil, but in this just like completely absurd, somewhat fantasy setting.
Yeah.
And I got very much the same, like the whole time that I was reading this, I got very much the same vibe that I got from that book, and I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. Did you have a favourite character?
I don't know. I feel like I kind of loved them all equally, but and even as you asked that, I had like three instant different gut reactions. So yeah, I feel like
Okay, then who are your top three? Who were the three gut reactions that are fighting for top place?
Hero, Leto, and Rami.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I mean, Hero, brevity, and probably I can't remember what the Viking lady's name, but the Raven Guard that's just like, I just want to kill people. Like, she was just really funny to me. And I know that she's meant to be like this really scary butch Viking warrior queen that's just like, oh, I get to kill people now? Cool. Like, there's something kind of psycho about her, and I just found any scene that she was in was just made better, I think. Like, I just really, really enjoyed that. But this is something else that I would definitely recommend about this book, is even the B-list and C-list characters have a third dimension. Like, she is so classically the stoic warrior, but she's snarky and she's sarcastic and like she's really aggressive, and she's wound back in by her respect of others in a way that I find really, really interesting. Like, she's never battling them for authority. She accepts their authority. She just wants to kill people. Like, even things like that, or when you've got Beatrice, who is the character that Claire's created, and the fact that they had a relationship, and she's like set up this entire situation knowing that eventually Claire will come looking for her, or should like hoping that Claire comes looking for her, as like a third dimension to that relationship was really interesting. And then like the little moments where Claire is tested as to whether she's going to go back for Beatrice is just really interesting. I mean, even just having a pansexual main character was fun. Like, it was just, there's all these different layers to it, and it's, you know, it's not a long book. Like, it's like 400 pages, like 370 pages. No, it's 400 pages. I can count. So like, it's not a long book, but there's so much going on. And yeah, I think that's why when you said earlier about like the characters have like a development, it's not necessarily that they're changing, and it's not necessarily that they're going on much of an emotional journey, but we are given so much of who they are in just the way that they speak to each other and the way that they interact. Like, the idea of a muse being jealous that she can help you create something, but she never gets to create anything for herself. It's just really sweet. Like, that's just really wholesome. And then on the other end, you've got like Leto, who assumes he's a demon because he deserves to be a demon, but has no knowledge of being a demon, doesn't know anything about how anything works. Like, it's just, and then yeah, it turns out that it wasn't. It was just Andrus being a dick, you know? So yeah, no, it was great.
I think the thing, like, right at the beginning, I fell in love with brevity, but then over the course of the book, I just didn't feel like I connected with her in the same way that I got to connect with everyone else. Because halfway through, you know, she got sent back to the library, and then we still saw her, but like, she was then very like focused on protecting the library, and I felt like I didn't get to see, or I didn't get to have those like getting to know her moments that I was still getting with other people.
Yeah.
So I kind of fell out of love with her.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, this is the thing, is I think she's the softest of all the characters, and I think sometimes it can be really, really hard to relate to soft characters because you can only see them go through so much and stay soft. before A, it becomes unbelievable, or B, it becomes uninteresting. And I think it was interesting that, you know, she's preparing for a job she never wanted. She doesn't want to be a librarian. She wants to be a muse, but she's been kicked out of that. So she has the library. The library is all she has left. So there's only so far you can take that story. I did think like her kissing Leto was adorable, and her fighting alongside the damsels was adorable. Like think that all of her storylines, it was kind of like when you have a straight comedy and you have those moments of like low so that you can appreciate the high laughter moments. I felt like her moments of softness were there so that it wasn't jarring when everyone else goes in guns blazing, because you've got like a nice balance of the two. But I guess if it's I can see why she wouldn't be someone's favorite character though, because like you said, if you like the character development and you like watching characters grow and change and do stuff, all the other characters do that. Brevity doesn't learn a lesson. She just takes on a new job that she was already quite well equipped to do, because that's why Claire hands it to her, because she's like, yeah, you can do it. So there's only so much you can do with that, really.
Also, the damsels were amazing. They were my favorite part of the last like 100 pages.
Yeah, they were really cool. Like even just like standing up for themselves, and just the concept of damsels being characters that don't want to return to their books and don't deserve to be sent back to their books, either because their stories are very interesting or because they are literally just the damsel of their story. And the fact that they're not all women, I thought was really great as well. And the fact that they're just a group of people that don't want to, but because they stay in the library, they're protected and they can learn and change and do stuff. I thought that was very cool.
I think my only... This is maybe what made it a 4-star rather than a 5-star for me, is there were some things that I felt like weren't explained as well as I would have liked. Like, I feel like I would have liked more of kind of how the library works. And I know it was explained, but it felt like all of the like intricacies of the library were kind of glossed over to get through the action. Which once or twice I was like, why is this happening this way? So while like the plot as a whole was really easy to follow, once or twice I just felt like I was missing some details that I wanted.
Do you prefer like hard magic systems to soft magic systems then? Like in general?
I don't think so. I generally quite like soft magic systems as well, but I just I don't know what it was about this in particular that I still had questions.
Yeah, that's fair enough. No, I think it's fair enough, especially considering it's literally called the Library of the Unwritten, and they spend maybe 100 pages in the library. Like, I think it's fair to be like, oh, I'd have liked more of the library. You know, the fact that they're in the wing of the Unwritten implies there are other wings. So what's in those? Like, what other than books that are unwritten, what other things are there of interest? Do you know what I mean? Like, I just think it would be really, are there alternate histories in there? Are there like parallel universes? Like, there's so many things that they could have explored, even just hinted at, so that we could infer that. Do you know what I mean? So I think I think you're right in that. And I guess it just depends on what the author thought the purpose of the story was. If the library is a key setting and then everything else builds around it, how much time are you actually going to spend going into the magic system of it? Because it is kind of explained away as, oh, well, this is as much as Claire knows about it because her boss died before he could teach her very much. And she, she's read the diaries of the other librarians, but they were too busy just running the library and taking care of the library to really study the library. It'll be interesting to see how that works in the sequels, because sequels always take a world and make it bigger. So the implication of that is that we may well see more of the library, or we're going to see how the library interacts with the rest of hell. And if there's a library in hell, what else is there? Do you know what I mean? Like, are there museums? Are there theatres? Like, what other facets of education are there in hell if they have a library of unwritten books? Do they have a cinema of unmade films? Like, you know, there's all kinds of things, creative wise, museums of art that never got to be made. But I think the MacGuffin of Lucifer's Bible is definitely going to come up again in sequels, because that was another thing where they've spent the whole book looking for it, and then at the end they're like, is this it? Like, we need to now save the library. So I don't even remember if they found it at the end or if they just got a few more pages. I don't remember.
Well, I think hadn't Andrus destroyed like a decent amount of it.
I can't remember. This is what I'm saying, is like, I read it right at the beginning of the month, and that was, I don't remember that bit.
So I finished it today.
Good.
And that was one of the things where I felt like it wasn't made very clear.
No.
Which I think was intentional.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when Claire then meets with Malthus, she asks for it, and then Claire says something along the lines of, when she's talking to the others, she's like, "Oh well, they don't know if we do or don't have it, but the potential of us having it is like protection enough." So it's, I think the intention is that you don't, even at this point, you don't know if Claire has anything or doesn't.
Yeah. See, that for me is quite interesting, because like at the time it didn't bother me that I don't remember that or didn't notice it, because it was, the focus shifted from them chasing down this item to defending what they've left behind, which is fine, except it does leave that feeling kind of unresolved and kind of ambiguous. So yeah, I think you're right. Even subconsciously, that would bring it down to a 4 stars from a 5 stars if I'd given it 5 stars. But I was still just annoyed at the massive Andrus battle anyway, because that again is very stereotypical of an adventure book, is to spend the entire book trying to get to a place only to find that you need to rush back for a final battle because your home is being attacked. Like, that's very classic adventure, isn't it? So yeah.
But also, all the damsels teaming up to help them fight. There is a scene in one of the Shrek movies where all of the princesses start like defending the castle against the flying trees.
Yeah.
And that was all I could picture.
Yeah, and I believe it starts with Snow White singing AC/DC's The Immigrant Song.
Yep.
Of just the I can see that now. Like, thinking back to that battle scene, I'm like, yeah, I can absolutely imagine that playing in the background. That's really funny.
I had a point that I wanted to make, but I forgot what it was. What were you talking about before I said that?
Adventure stories, classic plot tropes.
Oh, I remember. That, like, obviously it was multi-POV, and I thought it was a really well done multi-POV, because often I find that, like, books will claim to have a multi-POV, and, you know, they'll have a chapter for each character, but it won't actually, like, nothing actually changes the story, and the story's still being told in the same way. Whereas I felt that this did do that well. Where when I was reading a Claire chapter, I felt like I was in Claire's mind, but also that they were still all very unreliable narrators. Like, even when I solidly felt like I was in someone's head, they would then 2 chapters later be like, "Oh no, actually this thing isn't the way you thought it was." And I didn't feel like, I felt blindsided, but I didn't feel like betrayed. I didn't feel like I was intentionally being, like, things were intentionally being hidden from me. It just felt like that was a natural part of these characters.
Yeah, there's stuff that they genuinely wouldn't know, and therefore it's not included. And it creates a really nice dramatic irony when the audience recognizes something before the characters do. The moment where Leto sacrifices himself is a really interesting moment, for example, because we see it through Claire's eyes. Now, we could have easily had that in Leto's chapter, the chapter before, because we've seen Leto react angrily to Claire because he's found out that not only is she a killer, she's a liar, because she's not told anyone about this. She's hidden it. And considering he's a demon or sees himself as demonic, he's probably the most morally good of all the characters. So to have him react like that and then sacrifice himself, but see the sacrifice from Claire's response so that she can be angry at him, is really interesting, because it means that we can see that he's a morally good person, and him weighing the scales means that actually they will get through that challenge. Whereas she is so hung up on protecting him, like even when you see the way they interact with each other, they recognize it in different ways. She sees it as, oh, he's getting under my feet or whatever, but the audience sees that as she sees him as a son. She sees him as like this little kid that she needs to protect, because that's how she sees everyone. She sees that she needs to, like, the only person that she doesn't, like, in her little group, that she doesn't actively go out of her way to mother is Hero. Like, Hero is the only one that she's just like, I need to trust you to take care of them, because I can't trust them to take care of them, so you're gonna have to do, kind of thing. So I really like that. I quite like multiple POV, because I find that I like, and I don't know if it's maybe just a superiority complex, I like when the audience recognizes more than the characters do. I think it's really hard to get right, but I love those moments, especially when you reread something and you're like, oh my God, it was here the whole time. And the characters have no idea, but you do, because you're picking up what the author is putting down. I think that's very, like, if an author can do that right, it's great. If an author gets it wrong, it's a bit, like, I think sometimes, like, for example, just because it's in front of me, and so it caught the corner of my eye and I saw it in A Court of Silver Flames, you can see how Nesta and Cassian's reaction to Rhys is different, because they have a different history with Rhys. But in the earlier books, when you read like the Throne of Glass series, for example, or even just A Court of Thorns and Roses, when there are different perspectives, they all just feel like Sarah J. Maas. Like, there's no like definitive, this character sees it this way and this character sees it a different way. And I think that comes with good writing, whether it's over years of practice or just a case of recognizing what these characters would and wouldn't see. And I think Hackwith is really good at being like, she wouldn't know that, or she wouldn't think of it in that way, and therefore I'm not going to have that in this chapter. I just think that works really, really well. And the fact that there are only 3 main perspectives, and then Brevity, I don't know if Brevity has chapters or if it's just hers are on the back of Claire's. I can't remember. But for the most part, it's because I know she's got like key scenes and stuff, but I don't remember any of the chapters actually having her name on them. Oh no, they do. So like, but that's once she's gone back to the library.
Yeah.
She's had to earn it at that point, which I also think is really, really interesting, because beforehand, there's no point having both Claire and Brevity have a perspective early on, because they come from the same place and they're experiencing the same things. So it's only when she separates that she then gets her own perspective. That in itself is really interesting. I forgot that she has her own chapters, because I just kind of saw them as Claire's chapters, because she is just kind of another facet of Claire to begin with. But yeah, no, that is just my really, really long-winded way of saying I completely agree with you.
I had another thing that came to mind. That's also gone now.
Mm.
I need to start making notes in life.
It's been a long week, to be fair. It's been a long week. So that's fair. I mean, like, I've put a couple of things down. So I've put, for example, Claire being the stereotypical librarian, her being such a grump at the beginning versus her towards the end. I really liked that as like a thing, because it is a job for her, and I think that's really interesting, because I don't know if I can think of many adventure stories where not only is the lead a woman, but a career-driven woman. Like, I'm almost 100% sure this book would pass the Bechdel test, because other than discussing hero because they don't trust him, romance is very rarely mentioned, and no romance between men and women is ever mentioned. Like, it's just, there's the moment where Brevity kisses Leto, but that's more to distract him than anything else. That's not, or to like as a distraction in general, as opposed to like any like actual relationship. So I think it's really, really interesting to have that, and I would love to read more adventures where the moral of the story is, if you want a job done right, get a woman to do it, because she gets a promotion at the end. Like, that's her conflict resolution. Is, yeah, she fixed the problem, she got a promotion. Like, they trust her, apparently. She doesn't trust them, but they trust her apparently enough that they think that, yeah, let's give her a job, whatever. Like, I just think that as a thing is quite cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Any closer to remembering what it was? Was it character related? Was it plot related? Was it theme related?
It was probably character related, but it might come back to me at some point.
That's fair. That's fair. We haven't discussed Remiel at all, really, other than casually mentioning that the angels are not good people. So you had him in one of your top 3. So what gives him top 3 status?
I think just the fact that I like characters that don't do what's expected. And by that point, I was just like, well, I was going to say by the end of the book, but really from like the first time that we were heaven adjacent, I was just like, I don't like these people. So then and from the beginning, I was like, okay, there's more to him. Like, yes, he's really excited about the prospect of like being allowed back into the fold, but like, he's going to be interesting. And then just throughout the book, every time he did something that was still like him being on the side of heaven, I was just like, you're going to change. Like, I believe in you. And and then he rewarded that belief, which I liked. But yeah, I found him interesting the whole way. Like, there was never a point, even when he was doing things that upset me, I always had such faith that in the end he was going to do the right thing. And I liked that him doing the right thing was him deciding to get a job in hell.
Yeah.
Instead of like,
I don't think this is working for me. Let's try. Let's work together on this. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah. For me, it kind of boils down to 2 things. The first is the fact that he is constantly compared to Lucifer because they fell at the same time, which I think is really interesting, because like, that's something that, like, it's in the Bible, but it's almost never really discussed, is that Lucifer wasn't the only angel to fall. Like, I think he was the first to fall, but he was never the only one, you know? And it's really interesting to see it as like, Lucifer fell for questioning God because he didn't like humans and thought angels were better, whereas Remiel fell as part of a rebellion and does care about humanity. Like, again, he's very, very similar to Claire in that he will do whatever it is he needs to do to protect people, because to him, people are the most important thing. So like the moments when like Claire and her little group escape him, he's not as mad as he should be. Like he should be the classic paladin of just like outrage and honor, and just kind of like, I need to fight my way back into heaven, and to do that I will smite whoever I need to smite, which is very much how Uriel is, and that's why I hate her. But with Remiel, it's a case of, yeah, I could do that, but it would hurt a whole bunch of people. Like, and it's like, it's always about the humanity that he cares about, that I find really, and like when he calls them like demons and stuff like that, it's distancing. And throughout the book, he does it less and less, because he can see the humanity in them. And I just think that is a really subtle thing that's done, again, really, really well. And he gets a few good lines. Like some of the stuff that he says is very clever, and he, you know, he's not afraid to like share his opinion. He's not the classic good soldier. Like he's not a Captain America type who just follows orders. Like he does question things, which angels shouldn't do. So it didn't really surprise me when he decided to work for Hell at the end. I was convinced when that head demon lady, the general, came in, and he was just like, oh shit, like he has a reaction to her, which then tells you how scary she is. I thought she was going to be like, cool, we've got this position opening up, and I assumed it was going to go to Remiel, but then she's like, we're not having Angel do it, and he's just like, I mean, I'll help, like I don't mind. Like I thought that was really cool. But yeah, I thought as a character, again, it's just that classic of like, here's the stereotype, but we're just going to do this to it for a bit, you know, we're just going to mix it up a little bit. And now I just need the two of them to kiss, and then everything would be great.
Remiel and the scary head demon lady.
No, Remiel and Claire. Although that would be interesting. That would be interesting. Just imagine if she just came up and was just like, wow, you're twice as scary now.
Okay, because I was getting a vibe with Claire and Hero.
Right, polyamory is a thing. I don't think either of those gents would mind sharing Claire. Claire deserves to have the attention of two gorgeous men. Like, just saying. I wouldn't be against it. Throw Beatrice in for a good measure. I just feel like that is the quartet for the ages, you know? I'd be here for it.
Fair.
Like, I have nothing to add to that. Hannah, you've gone too far.
No, I mean, I'm here for it.
I just think it would be great, because I just think it is just one of those things where, like, Remiel and Hero are polar opposites. And Claire, even though they're both morally grey, they're like either end of the spectrum of morally grey. Claire is slap bang in the middle. She's a killer and she's a manipulator, but she's inherently a good person. Everything she does with good reasons. And I can't remember, there's like a phrase of like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Like, that's her life motto. She knows damn well why she's there, but she's still trying her best to do the right thing. And I can appreciate that. So, yeah. I just think they make a great little trio, that's all.
I think I just because I picked up on a vibe between Claire and Hero, I think I just assumed that at some point I would start getting a vibe between Ramiel and Brevity. Just to, round things out nicely. But I think that's just because I'm used to there being romance in everything that I read, and I'm used to everyone being like rounded out into couples nicely. And I was like, well, there's no one for Brevity to end up with, so it has to be this guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I can see that. That is one thing that I think is really interesting about this, because I think you're right. It's really easy to like couple people up, and I'm like you, I'm very used to, even if I don't necessarily lean into reading fantasy romance as much as you do, I still see it. And like, it's got to the point where like my brother and I are watching a D&D series called Dimension 20 that's been going for years, but I've only just discovered it. Like, it literally just, I just stumbled across it. And they're doing all these different campaigns, and there's all these different characters, and anytime the voice actors as their characters like engage in a certain way, I'm like, oh well, they're gonna kiss, and then they never do, because it's not part of their story. Like it's just not something at the forefront. And I think the great thing about Library of the Unwritten is if you're not into fantasy romance, there's enough of there to be like, well, there's chemistry, there's potential, there's intrigue, but there's nothing concrete. Like, I think you and I could speculate about this for days, but until we read those next books, we'll never know, like, who's going to end up with who. Like, we could put money on it, and I'd be like, oh, she's going to land, like, and you'd be like, no, it's definitely going to be Hero and Claire, and I'll be like, Like, I just think that it has so much potential for, like, different relationships, because they all give a shit about each other for different reasons and to different extents. It's just really, I love that. I love that there's nothing like concrete about it. Like, no one kissed at the end and it lived happily ever after, because they're all in these like little couples. I don't know why I keep doing this, like this is couples and like this is something I keep doing. But I just think the fact that it's a bit ambiguous really works. I'm gonna stop doing this now.
When I got to within like 50 pages of the end, and at that point I kind of felt like if anyone did couple up, it would feel very rushed so that we've got a happy ending. And at that point I was just like, I don't remember the last time I read a fantasy book that didn't have any concrete romance in it. And as much as I'm a sucker for romance, I also really loved that.
Yeah.
Like, I could just appreciate the relationships between people without wanting to read into every glance and every word or like subtext of them being in love with each other.
Yeah, it felt authentic, because you're like, okay, well, they've only known each other 2 days. Like, they're not gonna like have these like awe-inspiring smoochy moments because it's been 2 days. So like, even things like that I think really work. Like, you can have chemistry with someone after knowing them 5 minutes, but are you gonna be like, I would die for you, I love you so much? No. Like, that's not like, so I think the whole thing is really interesting. And I just think, you're right, because like, I do read fantasies where there's no romance. Rarely. It is rare, and it tends to be written by men, high epic fantasy, as opposed to just standard YA fantasy or fantasy romance. And usually there's a girlfriend of the past, and that's what, they're jaded now, so they can't date anyone. It's that kind of like, oh, he's grumpy, or his wife died and therefore he can never love again. Like, it's always like that. None of them have this issue. None of them are like, okay, well, my partner died, so I can never love again. Like, Claire has Beatrice, and she has the ambiguity of, she helped Beatrice escape. She had no idea where Beatrice was, so she couldn't follow. And she knew that if she did follow, she would just be putting Beatrice in danger. And the fact that she has a really uncomfortable closure with Beatrice is the closest we get to romance. And even then, Claire is so determined not to sacrifice Beatrice that she just cuts off like her emotions at that point, and it's just like, no, it's been too long, I waited too long, she never came back, I killed for her, this relationship is over, kind of thing. And I think that's really interesting, because it's not unrequited love, it's like doomed love, and therefore not classic romance anyway. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And I then thought it was really interesting that Rumi was like, a woman, and she's just like, I know, I have so many layers. Like, I thought that was great.
No, I just remembered what I was going to say. I just remembered. Oh, also, because it had just come off the back of me reading Six of Crows, where like every interaction that anyone, because I went into the book knowing all of the pairings, like any interaction that anyone had, I was reading 10 million layers too deeply into. And it was so relaxing reading this and not having that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I read Six of Crows probably 2-3 weeks before this, and although I didn't know I knew about Kazbreka and Inej, and that was it. I didn't know about Nina and Nikolai, and I didn't know about Jesper and Wieland. But the moment Nina and Nikolai became a thing, I was like, oh, well, there's only 2 characters left, and one of them is gay. For sure is gay. So I'm going to assume everyone gets partnered up nicely. And although they've got like different arcs in their shit, they're all still coupled up. I'm doing it again. They are all still coupled up in the same way that a Mars collection of characters are still coupled up, and like a Holly Black collection are all still coupled up. So it was nice for this one to be like, not only are they not all coupled up, but yeah, the tension between them feels more authentic because we're not reading into it looking for a particular thing. It's there. Like, you can see it in the way that they banter with each other and the discussions they have and what they talk about, as well as how they do it, which I think was just, yeah, it was just great. Like, the dialogue, I really like the way the dialogue is written. I think it is really hard to nail decent dialogue, especially when it's fantasy, especially when you're trying to dump a whole bunch of info, because you need your audience to know what this thing is so that you can move on. I thought that was really good as well. It didn't. You don't think it felt info dumpy at any point, do you? Because I didn't. I thought there was like info that we needed, but it didn't feel dumpy.
Yeah, I felt that everything was given in kind of the right amount of information. So they would bring something into the story and then kind of explain it enough that you could understand what was happening, rather than spending a chapter giving you 100 years of backstory.
Yeah.
And at no point did the backstory or like the lore take me out of the story. It was woven in really well.
Yeah.
Where it added to the story.
Yeah. And I think it helped that there was a balance of characters that understood and a balance of characters that didn't, because you have Brevity, Andrus, and Claire who know what's going on in the library, but Leto, Ramil, and Hero haven't got a clue, which is really interesting. So it's never a case of, it's never the same person explaining everything, because sometimes it's Andrus, sometimes it's Claire, sometimes it's Brevity, and in the same way you haven't always got Leto asking questions. Sometimes it's Ramil, sometimes it's Hero. And I think that, as simple as it is having 3 and 3, it does create a really nice balance between like a push and pull, especially with the dialogue, but also when coming up with lore and having those, the mix of like soft magic systems and hard magic systems, and the push and pull of how you're going to describe that, I think works really well. Overall, I thought the book was just really well written, and there's a lot to be like commended on it. It was just the final few scenes, really, the ambiguity of the end. But really, is that fair? Because it's a trilogy, so it can't be like, and it ends. Here's a straight line ending, because 2 more books. So yeah, I don't know.
I think the thing for me that, like, I know your 5-star thing is, did it make me cry?
Yeah, basically.
And I think that was what was missing for me. Like, I thought it was excellent on every technical level, and I loved it. I just didn't like connect with it 100%. Like, it made me think, and it made me laugh, but it didn't make me feel things necessarily.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, there's no like residual emotional pull. Yeah, no, that's fair. I can see that. I can see why that would be. I did think it was good, but I think it's hard, because when you've got it's not a comedy, but when it's an adventure comedy, and certainly has comedy as like a key theme, you do need to have those dour moments. But I don't think Hackwith left us in those moments long enough to feel bad for the characters, because they don't, and partly that's because they don't have time. Like, the fact that it happens over 2 days means they don't have time to dwell on mistakes. Like, when Leto sacrifices himself, Hero is literally like, let's not beat around the bush. He did that so we could go. so let's go. Like, he doesn't even give Claire a moment to fully mourn. So therefore the audience doesn't have time to fully mourn him. And, you know, all of those things, it's stuff like that you're just like, oh, okay, I guess it's not that important then. Like, they've only known him 2 days. Like, it's sad, but it's not like heartbreaking. Like, I didn't find myself crying at that scene, even with Claire being utterly distraught that she's watching him walk into the mouth of the crocodile, or even with Beatrice, because again, we only see her over like 5 or 10 pages and then she's gone again. We feel sorry for Claire because Claire's going through it, but Claire is emotionally quite detached because she feels she needs to be, and therefore as an audience you just are. Like, you can't feel an emotion the character's not feeling. I don't think. I don't, anyway. If a character is sad, I'm sad. Generally.
If a character I like is sad, I'm sad.
Yes, yeah. If the character I don't like is sad, I'm laughing. But then I'm a bitch. That's how that works.
Oh, that's a mood.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm trying to think if there's like any other characters that we haven't really discussed. So Andrus was awful. Uriel was also awful as just generally. I think that's every individual. But...
like, Andrus was awful, but at least he was interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas Uriel was awful, but she was also boring. Like, she was predictable. Mm-hmm. Nothing about her was surprising. So reading scenes with her, I was just like, ugh. She's stopping the people that I like from doing this thing that they need to do, but also she's not actually interesting to read about. Whereas Andrus, at least, even in those moments where I was like, oh, he's going to do something bad, like, I was intrigued and I was interested because I didn't know what he was going to do. So she was just kind of like there, and she had to be there. Like, I don't want to say, oh, what have I done? Sorry. I just lost my
like, you said, what have you done? And then you were sideways. I was just like, you haven't done. Oh, no, you have done something. Okay, cool.
I was talking about Uriel. I know I was in the middle of a sentence, but I don't remember what I was saying.
So we were talking about how Uriel was boring and predictable, at least when Andrus did something evil, it was interesting.
Yes. Yeah, basically just that, like, she was, you know, stopping the story from going on, but it also... Oh, I don't want to say that she wasn't useful, because, like, I understand that she had to be there as a foil, but she didn't really do anything. Like, she was just kind of there all the time, being annoying.
Yeah.
But she didn't, like, add anything to my reading experience.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think anything that she did, she didn't actually do by being a full character. I think the fact that she was predictable made Remiel seem less predictable. The fact that she was boring made him seem more interesting. She is the cookie cutter of a predictable angel, and therefore anything that she does that Remiel doesn't, or Remiel does and she doesn't, is just enough of a contrast to make Remiel interesting. Because I think if we, as much as she doesn't necessarily bring anything to the plot, if she wasn't there to be constantly badgering Remiel, all he's doing is casually following Claire. Because, like, when they're in Valhalla and she's just, like, looking grumpy in the corner, she's not engaging with anyone, right? Remiel is engaging, not necessarily intentionally and not necessarily directly, but he is engaging. So it's just enough for Claire to kind of suss out what his plan is and to set him up to get away. Whereas if you didn't have Uriel there as the grey cloud in the corner, constantly badgering him to, like, chase them or do whatever, none of that scene has any worth because he's got no purpose of being there. Like, he's taking his time with it, and having Uriel there as just a loud ticking clock does serve a purpose. But I think you're right in that she's the only character that doesn't have a third dimension. And again, it makes it really anticlimactic when she's the one at the end who doesn't make it. Like, you don't feel anything. You don't feel a sense of triumph when she gets unmade. She's just unmade. Whereas if Remiel had been the one, it would have been a very different book. Like, it would have been a lot darker if he'd gone through all of that and then been unmade at the end, especially by Claire. So I think she serves as the outline and the mold that Remiel doesn't fit into. And even if that's just the purpose she serves, I think she probably deserved a third dimension. I think she has one, but only to the extent that she's ambitious. And there's only so much you can do with that, in the same way that with brevity, there's only so much you can do with a soft person who insists on being soft. So I think those are the two characters that kind of get let down the most. And the feminist in me is mad that the two characters are both female and all of the male characters got great arcs. But I don't think that was necessarily intentional. I think that just so happens to be the way the cookie crumbled in this instance. It doesn't make me resent the book in any way. And I still like the other characters enough that I don't mind having those Z-list characters carry very little, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, completely. And even when she gets unmade, they hint at the fact that she will come back because it's possible that she'll reform or whatever. And that I still felt nothing. I was like, I really don't care either way. Like, I don't have any sense of dread about her coming back. I don't have any excitement about her coming back. Like, they're not going to bring her back if she's not going to serve a purpose, but I just don't care.
Yeah, the only thing that would be interesting is if she does come back and now she's an angel of vengeance, because then she will come for Claire 100%. And if she gets like a third dimension at that point, because she becomes more of an antagonist, that will be interesting, because even that will be some kind of arc that she didn't get in the first book. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
The other thing I found really interesting was that both of the like in charge people were completely absent. So like that it's explicitly stated that the creators just kind of gone and deserted them. And also that Lucifer's discussed, but also in a way that kind of he seems to be pretty absent as well. Like, he doesn't really seem to be concerned about what's going on in hell. He doesn't intervene at any point. He's like not at all bothered about what's going on in his realm. And I feel like that's going to lead to something really interesting, because why make such a big deal about that if they're not going to come back?
Yeah, if they're not going to do anything with it. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I love that the creator is a woman, and she gets referenced as the creator. She did such and such. She's gone. I was just like, like, it's so subtly done in the way that it's completely explicit, but just kind of like dropped in as like, yes, we don't know where she's gone. This creator, she's just disappeared. Blah blah blah. No one has seen her. Da da da. And it's just like, all right, I see how it is. I love that.
I also I'm kind of interested for when Lucifer does come back. Like, there's the show Lucifer has an interesting take on him where he's like, I'm not evil, it's just this is my job. Like, I was exiled and then I was given this job. And I would be interested if Lucifer here is like has a similar take, and that's why he isn't around and doesn't care. He's just like, oh well, this is something I have to do.
Yeah. So the first chance he got to escape, he did.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it would be really interesting if Lucifer had retired to the Unwritten Library and was one of the damsels, in the same way that Hero wasn't a hero, the damsel wasn't a damsel, because in theory he could be, because he is a character in a book who is vilified and treated poorly. If he were to escape his own book, now I appreciate that the Bible was written, so it's not necessarily unwritten, but there might be passages or other stories that were unwritten that he could escape from, he would then fall into the category of a damsel, in that he doesn't want to return to his book because he's not interested in what that book has to offer, and he's not doing any damage just being in a library of unwritten books, helping, studying, and learning. That would be a really interesting thing. Now, I don't think that's not me predicting that's going to be how it turns out, but I wouldn't be mad if that's how it transpired. Is the fact that actually the reason the unwritten wing is there is because of the original book, the first book. There are stories in it that weren't told, and he was able to escape one of those stories and create the Unwritten Library, and that was like the origin story of it. Because I think it's really interesting, you saying about Lucifer, the TV series, he doesn't see himself as like an angel of death. He sees himself as judge, jury, and executioner. He's there. If you're a good person, he can't do anything to you. He can't do anything to you that you don't think you deserve. So there's moments when he goes into people's personal hells and they blame him for it, but he's not to blame because he didn't, like, it's their path. They've chosen this punishment for themselves. It'll be interesting if they like lean into that, because I think it's very, very easy to just be like, oh, well, he's the bad guy, so don't do what he does or he'll get you. Like, that's just a really easy, like, quite a childish mentality to have, which I appreciate I'm saying and probably upsetting a whole bunch of Catholics, but that's just my opinion on it in general. So it'll be really interesting to see that. It would be really interesting as well if it turns out the Creator and Lucifer are either in on it together or have a bigger plan that does not involve either heaven or hell. They're just like, nah, we're out. We've set up a little bar in Soho and we're just hanging out, like something like that. I think that'd be cool.
I would enjoy that greatly. So, since you mentioned Catholics, like, I'm Catholic, and I genuinely, reading books like this, I find so entertaining, but also, like, I'm very, like, susceptible to suggestion.
Amazing.
So, like, when I started watching Lucifer, I was like, yeah, not such a bad guy. Like, so the whole time I was reading this and like heaven are the bad guys, I was just like, of course they are. Like, they're so of course they're like these annoying self-righteous people.
Yeah,
and that it's like it's made very clear that like the afterlife realms are all equal. Like, they aren't, like, even though they are good or bad ones, because in one year, like, it's paradise and one you're being punished, like, they aren't good or bad ones. They're all on par. They all have the same amount of power. It's just you go to, you know, wherever is like your personal idea of paradise or punishment. And then when they go to Valhalla, Uriel's like, yeah, well, heaven's claim supersedes anyone else's. Like, but literally a chapter ago, we were told that that's not the case. Like, you guys are no more important than anyone else. But like, of course you think that you're the most important.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like, and that's why I liked when the soldiers rocked up at the end from Valhalla. One, because they're looking for a fight. So that character, the Raven Lady, is like, oh, I actually get to kill people now? Excellent. Love that for me. Is the fact that, yeah, of course, whilst they're outnumbered and they don't have superior numbers and strength, they can be like, oh, yeah, all systems are equal. Some will die out if you stop believing in them. And then when it's something that they're ambitious towards, they're like, oh yeah, no, Christianity, whoop whoop. Like, it's that kind of response they have to, I think, is really, really interesting. And I think that is, it looks at it more as a territory then, rather than a belief system. And I think that's really interesting because as much as I'm agnostic, I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I believe, and sometimes I'm like, I have too many questions to just have blind faith. So I can't say that I do. I do think it's really, really interesting that they take belief systems that are very binary. Like, at no point do we look at Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism. They look at three. They look at your classic heaven and hell, they look at Valhalla, and they look at the old Egyptian, like one Egyptian form of heaven, basically. And that's it. They don't look at anything else. And they even discuss that, you know, the Egyptians had more than one. They had, like, again, like with Valhalla, they have several layers to it. But this one has died out because no one believes in this ancient version of heaven anymore. So it's kind of derelict. Is really interesting and very kind of like, I haven't read American Gods, but the idea that you've got certain gods that are still believed in, so therefore have power over those who aren't believed in anymore. Like, I think that is always a really interesting plot trope. But yeah, because it becomes more about territory, I don't think it will isolate people who are like not interested in religion. Like, it's just part of the fantasy of the world building. It's just the world building, really. So yeah, I appreciated that as well. I thought it was great.
I also, when we were reading about the Egyptian one, like, it makes sense because Claire also speaks about like that your soul or like your memories of your life start to fade as people forget about you. So like, it makes sense that if there is no longer anyone around who believes in something, the thing will die out. But I was just like, what about all the poor people whose souls have gone there? And now, like, their eternity is just done because their religion died out.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. Just like, yeah, I guess eternity isn't for eternity. It's just for as long as someone remembers it, which can feel like eternity, but it isn't necessarily. That's really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. And kind of one of those things where it's not necessarily implicit in the writing, but it's something that you can like infer if you think about it too much, which I absolutely will now. Interesting.
I love how this was supposed to be just a chat about a fantasy book. And it turned into like...
Yeah, well, no, you know, nothing's in a vacuum. I find it really interesting whenever I review books for NetGalley or on my website. I always make references to other stuff because you're never going into something with zero context. It's just not possible unless it's the first book you've ever read. There's no way you can go in with zero context. So I think this book is very clever in it understands what context you're bringing to it and why. So everyone understands that, even if they don't understand necessarily how heaven works, that heaven is the opposite of hell. So to take those two polar ideas and then to just spend an entire 400 pages chilling out in the grey area between them is really interesting. And to have characters that fall into tropes in the first 3 chapters that then spend the rest of the book breaking those tropes of having a hero actually be a villain and having a fuddy-duddy librarian be a killer and have a demon actually just be a troubled young man, like all those things. You're not going into any of those isolated because you can't. It's physically not possible. So I have no problem with the 100 different detours we took today because I think it was well deserved. And I think this book, even with the really succinct writing style, like, it isn't convoluted, like it can feel a bit pretentious in Claire's chapters because I think Claire is a very well read person and it has her like snooty voice sometimes, but it's not pretentious at all. I think there is a lot that can be like pulled from this as a narrative in general. I think it's very interesting, especially as someone who, like, so for my dissertation for my BA, I wrote about how heaven and hell is portrayed, or how hell in particular is portrayed in literature, and how often the portrayal of hell is based on Dante's Inferno, not anything from the Bible, because although the Bible may talk about specific layers of hell, it's not to the detail and depth that Dante's poem does. And really it's just as this hellscape that's the opposite of heaven. If heaven is utopia, hell is not. Hell is fire and brimstone. And the actual words used to describe it are very vague. Whereas Dante's Inferno is like 600 pages of poem about how each layer is awful and gets worse and worse and worse. And it looks at things other than fire, but there's fire and demons and ice and all kinds of things. And I think this is really interesting because it has essence of Dante in it, in the fact that there are different parts of hell, but it's still vague. Like, it's still super vague. It's not a map for the hell, because we only get to see one wing of it, which is why I think the next two will be really interesting, because it'll be interesting to see if they show us more of hell, or if once again she has to go and explore a whole bunch of other religions to get something back. Like, that'll be really interesting. I'm just really excited to read the next one, to be honest.
But especially because we know that there are other libraries in other realms. So are they other kinds of libraries? So they're of completed books but also themed? Or are they also unwritten libraries? In which case, do we assume that all of the books in their unwritten library are by people who believe in the heaven and hell system, and unwritten books in another library would be by people that believe in that belief system? Like, I have so many questions about the other libraries.
Yeah, exactly. I really hope we get to see more libraries, because that would be great. Have you got any other questions or points you want to raise?
I don't think so. Nothing specific.
No.
I also have just realised we got a comment right at the beginning of this.
Oh yeah, Carolyn said hello.
That I didn't see.
And also said that she hasn't read the book. She's in one of my Discords. She's amazing, and guaranteed she'd really enjoy this book. So Carolyn, if you are still in the comments, if you're still hanging about, read The Library of the Unwritten. It's really good. And
even
Carolyn
though we've
also
just
doesn't care
spoiled
about spoilers,
absolutely
so
everything
she really
for
doesn't
you.
care about spoilers, so you're fine.
Yeah. Did you have anything else?
I don't think so. I think that's basically it, which I think means we can discuss the next book.
Yes. So I have not been managing time management lately. So
me either, to be fair.
We are halfway into May, and only announcing the next book now. So it's going to be the May and June book, and then we'll do the live probably at the beginning of July. And it'll be The Girl in the Walls by AJ Hackwith. Do we want to pronounce the G?
Yeah, I was going to say, we're working through our AJs. How bizarre. But yeah, I would just say Noose. I imagine the G is silent. Like gnome, you know? Anyway, you were saying.
I'm going to assume that. This, we're hoping, is a ghost story, and not... we're hoping it has a ghost in it. But should I just read the whole synopsis? Because I feel like I can't summarize this. Okay.
Go ahead.
Elise knows every inch of the house. She knows which boards will creak. She knows where the gaps are in the walls. She knows which parts can take her in, hide her away. It's home, after all, the home her parents made for her. And home is where you stay, no matter what. Eddie calls the same house his home. Eddie is almost a teenager now. He must no longer believe in the girl he sometimes sees from the corner of his eye. He needs her to disappear. But when his older brother senses her to, they are faced with the question, how do they get rid of someone they aren't sure even exists? And if they cast her out, what other threats might they invite in? It sounds amazing.
It sounds really spooky. It's got definite spooky vibes. I'm really intrigued by this one. And, spoiler alert, we have a signed copy to give away. So keep your lemons peeled for that. We'll be posting a scavenger hunt for people to win this copy that is genuinely signed. And it comes with this really cute little bookmark that has like a shiny girl on it, which I appreciate, and is legit signed as opposed to a stamp, because you can tell it has the ink coming through on the other side, which I appreciate. So there'll be more info about that. I don't know where my copy's gone. This is not my copy. This is the signed copy, but my copy is in here somewhere.
Why didn't you get a signed copy for yourself?
I genuinely don't know. I think I got a copy in anyway because it was a new release and I was really excited to like check it out. And then when you told me that you wanted it to be the June read, I was like, oh, I can get signed copies in. So I just got the one in. And because then I already had a copy for myself, I was like, if someone buys that copy from the website, then I will get myself a signed copy. But if they don't, I'm not that fussed about it. Like, unless I really, really love this, in which case I will fight for a signed copy. I don't know.
So to see the information when we post the scavenger hunt, the Twitter and the Discord are in the description, so join us. Also, Hannah's channel is in the description, and the shop that she made reference to is Waypoint Books, which is her bookshop. So there's a link to that in the description as well. And if you are somehow still here and haven't read Library of the Unwritten, you can buy Library of the Unwritten through Waypoint. Is this on the website yet?
Yes. So the hardback is available on the website. Okay. The paperback isn't available from my distributor yet, so it's just the hardback at the moment. But there will be a discount code shared in the Discord so that people can get it at a discount, because the standard hardback is $12.99, so it will be discounted from that. And then postage is included in that price anyway.
So please support Hannah and support Waypoint. This is an ARC, which is, that's not why it's paperback, because we don't really get hardbacks. So if it was a finished copy, it would still be a paperback, but this is an ARC.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Oh, exciting.
I'm really excited to start it. And I'm thinking of sectioning it to keep myself on track.
Okay, that makes sense.
I got really excited. I was really proud of myself that I started Library of the Unwritten 2 weeks into the month. I think I still have like 5 or 6 draft tweets of like quotes that I liked that I was going to share. And then I had to read 2 other like time-sensitive books. So I stopped reading Library of the Unwritten and ended up finishing it today. So I think I need to just like find a thing to do to make myself stay on track with this and not end up reading it the day of the next live as well. Yeah.
Well, I'm joining. So Molly, Emma, Ali and I are setting up, or have set up even, another book club, which is basically just chaos. It's called the Hullabaloo Book Club, and it's just going to be absolute carnage. Every month we're going to do a different challenge, and then whoever wins the challenge gets to pick the book. I'm also doing the Dead Famous Read Along, and I'm joining a private off BookTube book club, which means that I will have a guaranteed 4 books a month that I have to read. And I'm really considering doing regular reading and writing sprints, if only to hold myself accountable to actually reading those books. Because at the moment I'm like, oh, the live stream's tomorrow, I can get this done in like a few hours, right? Like, and then just cramming it in and then being like, ooh, there's an audio book. Let's just cram that in some more, you know? So yeah, but we'll work on that. We'll work on our accountability. I'm sure you and I could do something either live or sprinty.
Yeah, I'm super keen to start doing sprints, more sprints.
More sprints. Oh, cool. Okay. Well, then I guess that's it, and we can leave this here.
I think that is it.
And next month it will be on my channel for a change.
So again, Hannah's channel is in the description, so go and subscribe to her now so that you can watch all of her videos. Also, she has a book coming out next month, so
yeah, thanks for remembering. I didn't. I was like, I'm sure there's something else I meant to mention at the end of everything I do now. Can't remember what it is. Oh yeah, that thing. Yeah.
So her book's called The Bridesmaid Survival Guide, and it is also available on Waypoint. But yeah, just go follow Hannah on everything so that you can see information about that. I'm very excited to read it.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're going to end off. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you on Hannah's channel next month.
See you later.
Bye.